community over competition? And why is collaboration the way of the future? The panelists for this discussion include Anuradha Roy Chaudhary, Head of Corporate Communications at DP World; Bishnupriya Narayan, AVP Corporate Communications and PR at Dream Sports; Madhavi Behl, Head of Corporate Communications at First Source; Priya Zutshi, Corporate Communications Lead at GreenCell Mobility; and Flovie Martins, Head of Communications at Marsh McLennan Global Services, India. Moderating the panel today is Sharmistha Ghosh, Vice President at Avian. Over to you, Sharmistha.
Thank you so much, Anubhuti and Promise Foundation team, for organizing a session on something which is so important and very close to my heart. Why is collaboration the way for the future? What does this really mean? Well, we all know that COVID impacted the economy and further diluted the essence of equality and equity. While it exposed us to so many layers of flaws, this unimaginable crisis brought together different stakeholder groups to create competitive and innovative partnerships addressing the common call of humanity. Through this panel today, we hope to advance an in-depth conversation on this binding power during the current crisis, as well as how it will play a very significant and pivotal role going forward to forge future pathways based on trust, values, knowledge, empathy, and resilient partnerships. So this entire panel has been divided, the discussion will be divided into two parts. In the next 35 minutes, the first part would focus on me asking some of the panelists, the experts, about the examples that they can potentially share around opportunities, innovations, and disruptions surrounding partnerships and better connect with stakeholders that emerged during COVID-19. And the second part is more futuristic, where we will be discussing future strategies. What are those measures that we need to have in place to ensure that all the learnings that we have had from this unfortunate pandemic is something that we don't lose and doesn't fall through the cracks. So I'll start the discussion with the first part of the panel, and I'll start with you, Anuradha. Anuradha, people, businesses, planet were deeply impacted during COVID. So what are some of those learnings and reflections that you have from the last 24 months around prioritizing sustainability and impact on communities and environment? If you could share some examples with us. Anuradha, you're on mute.
I'm so sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, I was saying that 2020 was really a catastrophic year for many of us. I mean, almost all of us, and personally, many of us have been affected. We've had uncertainty, mental health challenges, existential struggles. Everything has been part of our world. I think most of it, what I've felt is that in this world's recovery has to be based on two things. It has to be equity and sustainability. No one should be left behind. I think the learnings or the reflections, if I do within this past 2 years, would be that many of us have been fortunate enough to be in a position where we have been supported well in this pandemic. Unfortunately, this unprecedented human crisis has been, very tough on many segments of the society, and we all know that. And that's where we have to step in, and organizations, government, uh, partners, NGOs, community partners, all of them, we have to come together. And I think that's what has been shown in this 2 years, how people have actually collaborated, the power of collaboration. This is this one thing, if this pandemic has taught us and should have taught us, is the power of collaboration. It was not an easy task to probably feed people who didn't have food, or get vaccines to people who didn't have access to vaccine. So be it basic necessities or vaccine availability, all of this needed the power of collaboration. And we have seen multiple examples, governments, organizations, the police force, the medical community, everybody came together. cross sector and public private government partnerships. I think these were very, very key. These actually came up. I mean, I'm sure these were there before pandemic, but if you see during the pandemic, cross company collaborations, different organizations tied up with their own strengths. So people brought to the table things which they had access to. Any Somebody had huge distribution network, they use that. Somebody had network for food and beverages, they use that. So all of those strengths came together. I think building blocks of the economic recovery or the recovery from the pandemic were this: collaboration, equitability, having a focus on equity, and focus on sustainability. It has to be the core, because so we've seen that what's happened during when we were all at home, what had happened to the environment. There was so many things around the environment which was being told that it's really, really progressing and improving. The economic revival cannot be at the cost of our planet. No one should be left behind. So that's equity. And economic revival cannot be at the cost of the planet, and that's very, very critical. Sustainability has to be at the core, be it where we have global efforts of identifying and developing any treatments, medications, vaccines to fight the pandemic. Governments, businesses, NGOs, communities, everybody must need to work together. I think that's truly important, and that cannot fall through the cracks. So I think another thing which I wanted to kind of come up with is that during this pandemic, one of the learnings which I have had and I have seen is that there has been a lot of focus on trust. People have actually built and look forward to forging relationships and trust within the community, which could be, if we all refer, and we've probably all seen that, if you refer to the Edelman Trust Barometer, it says that the mistrust has grown. Yes, it can happen. It has grown because of certain issues in terms of resource mobilization, but trust can be built. My learning, or you can say, I reflect on this, that we all say that we have started working remotely, right? So interpersonal connection, face-to-face meetings have reduced. That is also, in a way, actually, there are people who we probably not in the hall corridor or office corridors, we would have spoken to them, we've asked about their health, we would have empathized with them with their loss. There has been a lot of connections which we could build. I think that's critically important, is building trust, interpersonal trust, trust within the public-private partnership I was talking about earlier, where trusting the organizations which we work with, our partners. That's very important, because they bring in the expertise. Today we do not, as a single organization or a single entity, none of us will have the gumption or the reach to do what we want to do in terms of economic recovery or outreach, community outreach. So sustainability, keeping sustainability in mind, if we need to really work together, we have to build trust with our community, with the community partners. We need to have a long-term multi-pronged approach towards recovery. So, of course, if you see, the United Nations have focused on the ultra vulnerable, millions and millions upon people who are the least able to protect themselves, needed support. And it has been disproportionately affected the poor. The virus has affected the poor, the homeless, and people without resources. So not one solution will actually fit them. And we have different outreach programs. We have communities within our sphere of influence. We have communities outside our sphere of influence, which typically is something which we work with, right? Organizations work with. How do we leverage this? We leverage this by collaboration, which I was talking about earlier again. So building trust, collaborating. How do we collaborate? We collaborate by exchange of expertise. An NGO, for example, or a community partner will have probably reach, but you might have the expertise which you can lend to them. So, sharing, collaboration, trusting them to do the right thing by you and the right thing by the society is very, very critical. I think that's really, really important, and that's something which I wanted to kind of touch upon. Uh, One thing which comes out and stands out from this is that, policy, if not properly addressed through policy, social crisis created by COVID-19 pandemic may also, increase inequality, exclusion, discrimination, and global unemployment across. Having social protection systems, these have emerged. How much of importance a comprehensive universal social protection system in place is important, and that's something which is like, works as a stabilizer to the economy. If you need to really grow, do economic recovery, that will be very, very critical. So
Thanks.
that would be my take on this.
Thanks, Anuradha, for sharing your perspective on playing on strengths with multi-stakeholder partnerships, building trust to ensure that nobody is left behind. I will now move on to Bishnupriya. Bishnupriya, what are your views on communications? Since you are a communicator yourself, what are your views on communications playing a significant role in ramping up partnerships for creating better connect with individuals, society, and community at large?
Sharmistha, you mentioned earlier that the importance of community has come to the fore more than ever before in India, and with similar and broader implications everywhere else. If you look at teams at work, sure, technology-based communication platforms have become more commoditized and accessible than ever before, and they've built all of us a rapidly growing addressable audience. But at the same time, as the disruption continued in the second year, systems and processes were being replaced. We saw systems and processes being replaced by individuals and teams who were then working in exceptionally selfless circumstances to ensure that colleagues are supported. Again, sure, business continuity and crisis management models, we had to deploy them, on a daily basis across the nation, not just companies, but governments and, what have you. But they were also enhanced by the model behavior that managers and superiors sought to do the right thing by their teams and their people. Even if you look at family members at home, the nuclear family fabric was tested to its last fiber. We had to find composure and patience in dealing with each other, in addition to space and additional space and flexible time, and to match the demands of homeschooling for some of us, elder care, domestic chores, the whole medicine, supply chain management, etc. Um, then if you look at the neighborhood, frustrations ran really high when the RWAs were deemed to be putting in overreaching in their imposition of COVID safety regulations. India even today is devolving into a coalition of districts every time the new lockdown. Every time a new lockdown regulation comes in place, but somehow still, we have been able to find our way around guidelines and use freedom to get through the unlocks. And finally, but not least, the friends of friends networks, the role that support groups have played using social media and finding support, delivering help, even sharing grief was remarkable. So we all have stories of how we got information when we needed it, shared AI driven tools, channeled Facebook, Twitter, WhatsApp updates to the most in need. And through these heart wrenching stories, the thing that you will find, the instances of pure human kindness have always come through. So in all of these cases, in about the last 24-26 months, you'll see that collaborative rather than competitive communications has been the thread that has tied us together, kept us together as a nation.
Thanks, Vishnupriya. You touched upon something very important, which is the role of technology. You know, how technology helped in amplifying reach, delivering help, and also sharing grief, be it through WhatsApp or by connecting with doctors through, telemedicine services. This brings me to the next question to Flovie. Flovie, your views on the role of technology in adapting to challenging times. How do you think it, played a significant role in improving access to the right information and services? And what else do you think one can do to bolster this further to create, better impact for greater good?
Hi, everyone, and good evening. And first of all, thank you to the team for inviting me to this forum. So, technology per se is a vast subject. For the purpose of this conversation, I'll stick to digital technology. If I were to ask right away, show of hands, how many people know toddlers around them with a smartphone in their hand and using it nonetheless, I think 90% of us would raise our hand. So that's how far the adoption and adaptation of technology has reached. It's become that easy to use your smartphone devices. If we are also talking about adaptation, I think today if you go to the farthest village in India, along with buying a Parle G and a Maggie, the same vendor might probably also be selling you a broadband connection. With that, what has happened is the adoption of different services has also reached over there. So I think we all know how the pandemic, pushed the adoption of technology, whether someone liked it or no. I know so many people who were aversive to using wallets. Like, I don't want to use a Paytm, or I don't want to use a GPay. But after a point, you just could not ignore it. When the lockdowns were announced, or even now because of the social distancing, I think we've all got adapted to ordering groceries online, to making payments online. Touching upon social good, actually, on that part, I remember there were so many people who wanted help and momentarily, and it was just possible to transfer money right away or to create a group. Like certain apps have gone to business nowadays and transfer the money there, and they could get it when they need it and not 10 days later when it would have been irrelevant. So that's what technology, or rather digital technology, has done. I actually see ourselves 10 years down the line being in the position that our parents are in, and probably our children being in the position that we are in, struggling to adopt with the latest technology, because it's changing and becoming exciting to adopt and easy to adopt that quickly every day. So while I spoke about the good of digital technology, I would also want to touch upon the dark side of technology, which at least we all have heard about. And the two things that come to my mind is fake news and security breaches or data breaches because of the apps that we download. So I would just say that as corporate communicators, we have the opportunity to educate people. Being in the staying in metros, we have these conversations quite frequently in our circle, but probably our colleagues or people living in tier 2 markets do not know it as much. So somehow, through our work, if we are able to have these educative sessions for them. I mean, HR is doing so much around social well-being, just well-being, wear a mask and all of that. Why not invite people to actually talk about how fake news is spread, how data breach happens, and they're very simple things. Just an example: you download an app and you give access to the app developer to have access to your camera, to have access to your contact list, by just probably keeping an option off even on your phone device that cuts the third party access to your data. But these are small things that people don't know which matter. So education on using technology is the way to go forward, because people will be adopting it as it gets simpler to adopt further, and with broadband reaching to all the corners of India. It's just that adopt as needed and move with caution is how I would view digital technology.
Thanks, Flovie. Thanks for talking about the adoption of services and technology, and also inventing, reinventing as we progress with time. This brings me to the next question to Madhavi. Madhavi, how important it is to keep reinventing systems and processes that demonstrate a culture of learning and collaboration. I think, Flovie, you also spoke about it. What are those strategies that you think we have adapted in the last 24 months to create this ecosystem that really nurtures collective spirit, and thereby creating enablers that lift each other up? If you could share your views on that.
Sure, Sharmistha. Good evening, everyone. What I'll do is, Sharmistha, I'll just step back a bit and set a bit of a context. The fact is, even before the pandemic, we were seeing a tremendous rise in the concept of the shared economy, right? You have entire systems, business economies, and business models built on the spirit of collaboration, whether it's Airbnb, whether it's fraternity, even an Uber. What the last 2 years have done is they've simply phenomenally accelerated that leverage of technology and brought it into various further aspects of our life and at the workplace for sure. And now to your question, by definition, learning is a continuous process, right? Therefore, upgrading of the systems and the processes that allow for that learning, constant reinventing of those systems is critical. To address your second part, how did okay in first source, I'll give you an example of what we did across three aspects in how we drove collaboration in three different aspects of work life. balance, if you want to call it that. The first would be, what we did was we set a series, and it's a continuous thing that we can do even now. We set up a program called the hackathon, where we could ask people to come together to build a prototype or suggest an idea or solve for a particular problem. And these people need to be across geographies, across functions, businesses, age groups, roles, etc. Right? That brings them together to look at one particular problem from a diverse set of eyes. Therefore, bringing in that concept of, you're learning and you're collaborating towards one particular agenda. That was one aspect. The other example I want to bring about is the more lighter one. It's about a global fitness challenge that we developed, which is basically a 12-week program which gamifies fitness. You have to form a team of 6, which is diverse, and you are given a particular weekly goal, and you come together to attain that goal. Obviously, the overall goal is fitness, but what it does, it enables people who've never met and interacted to get to know each other, to motivate each other towards that goal, and to support somebody else's goal in their fitness journey. So that was a huge success as well. The third piece, I think, which some people will question whether it's really collaboration, but I do believe it is, because it's about coming together for a particular intent. Is what we did is we saw a lot of interest in people wanting to do stuff for those in need. So we developed a host of employee volunteering programs across various interest factors, where people come together and give back to society as a collective. So basically, what we've done is to summarize this, what we've done is we've built an ecosystem that allows people to collaborate and learn across work, which is the hackathon, across play, which is the fitness challenge, and across giving back to society, which is volunteering.
Thanks, Madhavi, and thanks for sharing some simple yet impactful examples of how engaging employees to lift up their spirits not only help the organization to make an attempt to create an ecosystem for learning, but also create shared value. During the first question, Anuradha had touched upon climate change and impact of climate change, rather. Priya, my question to you is that, the recent, as we have seen in the recent comprehensive assessment report that was issued by IPCC yesterday, India is among the places that will experience these intolerable conditions as we go along. There will be impact on Mumbai and many other cities within India. What do you think are, we all know that these climate change indicators have in fact worsened in the last few years. And if after COVID, something that really needs emphasis and thrust is climate change resilience, or, mitigating climate change impact. How do you think multi-sectoral partnerships can drive climate change discourse and action? Your views on that?
Just actually, thank you so much for having me, first of all. So just to reiterate what Sharmistha has said, basically the challenge at hand is what the UN Secretary General has called that 2022 will be emergency mode for us. What this means for us is basically that we need to do whatever we had planned according to the Paris Agreement. We had made so many commitments during that time. Now is the time to act on those. We know that we'll have to almost half the carbon emissions that we were supposed to happen in 2030. We'll need to half them by 2030. So the challenge at hand is immense. What is required is the learnings that we have had in the climate change movement, basically, so far, whatever we have seen. So I'll just give you some examples of how it has worked, what successes we have had. First, I would want to go to the LED lights. So we all have them now in our lives. It was not very long ago that we didn't even know what was the advantage of LED. But now, because of the governments coming together, with the civil society coming together, as well as the private sector playing a huge role in it, that's why we have LED lights today across the country. India is a very big success story on that front. Secondly, the solar energy story. So what we are buying currently, the solar energy rates right now are lowest in the world as far as India is concerned. So that's an amazing story to copy. We are seeing the third intervention we are seeing is electric vehicles. We are seeing almost every big player in the mobility sector now entering electric mobility. There are solutions in this space, and we are seeing the changes very fast. All this is thanks to all the people coming together. So it's thanks to the government playing their part on the policy front.
It is thanks to the private sector taking the onus of actually telling the story to the consumers. And of course, the private sectors who have understood that this is the way forward. Like time and again, we are talking about the recovery post COVID needs to be a green one, an inclusive one, like Anuradha spoke about. All this will be only and only possible if we look at this climate change story and we are able to, as communicators, talk to the wider audience about it. But I think that it's a very good example of how the all the three PPP have come together, and we have seen success in this. So I don't see what could be possibly. I mean, this is the biggest example we have of success as far as partnerships go. So I hope that we'll take these learnings on a journey forward too.
Thank you, Priya. I think very good example, and definitely communicators and the role of communication will further be elevated as the world sees more challenges, and therefore communicators can play an important role in educating stakeholder groups rightly and getting them together. Well, thank you all for a very well on encompassing discussion. For the first set of questions that we had, it is important now than ever for individuals, organizations to reevaluate their stance to forge stronger partnerships with people through their initiatives, be it with employees or with the environment or communities, apart from products and services. This brings us to the second part of the discussion today, and as we come to the second part, a quick spotlight on our expert panel. We all know that in the last 24 months, and we've discussed that in the last 10 minutes, how organizations today are instituting mechanisms together or with other organizations to engage better with employees, local communities, other stakeholders through meaningful partnerships, collaborations with shared vision for a resilient future. What, according to you, are some of the most important measures that we must, nurture or assimilate to ensure that none of this that we have learned in the last 24 months fall through cracks in the post-COVID era? And I'll start with you, Priya.
Sure. So instead of the fallouts, I would just say the learnings that we've had. So I'll focus on those. First of all, Anuradha spoke about interconnected communities. All the panel actually spoke about, even Bishnupriya referred to it. So we have learned that communities are very interconnected. And as communicators, we'll need to see how this pans through, how we can tell that in our storytelling. Secondly, would be the shared value story. That's the most powerful story we as communicators have an opportunity to. If there's ever been a good time today, right now is the time to actually talk about the shared value story, because everybody seems to have understood it. Thirdly, the technology as an enabler. So Flovie talked about it, Madhavi spoke about it. So though that actually technology can be used for greater good is something that we found out. Of course, there are adverse effects, but as communicators, if we can enable the conversations around how technology can be done for greater good, I think even my sector, which is the electric mobility sector, has a lot of learnings that we want to see how technology will play out. We still have a lot of obstacles, or you can talk about needs and requirements as a sector we have from technology. And we hope that technology can actually be used for enabling a lot of things in my sector specifically. But I would say that technology as an enabler is something that we've learned, and that can be a way forward for us as communicators to talk to the consumers at large.
Thanks, Priya. Over to you, Madhavi.
Thanks, Sharmistha. I'm going to end up sounding quite similar to Priya, but what I would summarize is the first thing I think that will help stop, not allow this agenda to fall through the cracks would be a shared agenda, a shared vision, a shared purpose, which brings all of us people, everybody, all stakeholders together. And I think as communicators, we have a very important role to play in sharing that or bringing alive that sense of purpose or agenda for the entire organization or community. The second would be ensuring that there are, like Priya mentioned, the right infrastructures available for people to collaborate. Especially in the world that we live in today, we need those resources, etc., to enable people to come together, because the intent may be there, but without the infrastructure, it's invalid. The third thing I would say is it's not related to communications per se, but it's required for an organization or an entity is to build the sense of collaboration into the measurement system, right? You reward team effort, you reward teamwork, you build a performance management system that is not just individualistic, but that acknowledges and recognizes the collaborative effort that went into delivery. That's it. That's it
Interesting.
for me.
Flovie, your views.
So I'll actually talk about employee communications. And during the pandemic, I think there was a lot of focus on employee communications because organizations were struggling to keep their employees motivated during these 2 years. Now, what I have noticed is that people just started rushing into all different channels of communication. So I'd say number one, choose the communication platform or engaging platform that you think is relevant or that you actually need. For example, just because someone else is using Yammer or it's the talk of the town, it's not necessary that you should also adapt to having as many modes of communication as required. Two is once you have a channel of communication, have a long term strategy and keep changing that strategy and evolving as required. Again, if I just take Yammer as an example, just launching it for your employees is not good enough. Just look at it 3 months from now. Is it sustainable with content? Otherwise, it's a dead platform to be on. So, a sustainable strategy for communication, number two. And the third point, very importantly, is take a notice of over communication with employees. We keep speaking about it every time, everywhere that employees get a lot of mails. Then there are WhatsApp groups, and there is a company intranet. If you're a global team, there's a global intranet, and then these are the small chat boxes that we have on the side. So over communication does not translate to anything else but spam folder to the employee. So to keep that in mind when you're designing and sending out content.
Makes sense. Bishnupriya, your views.
Yeah, so everybody on the panel has spoken about how we need to create, a sense of shared set of values and accountability. And I'll just add that, while this is important, we must focus on creating a sense of shared set of values and accountability while also preserving individual autonomy. That's important. Today, we also understand, what it is to live, work, and engage as one community. So we need to build deeper interactions within our company, our users, our partners. So we need to keep empathy intact. The third thing is that investments in science, doing business the right way, proper corporate governance, these things matter more than before. So we need to keep that spirit of authenticity and experiment intact. And we need to ingrain in the importance of community as a competitive advantage rather than a competitive rat race. And so we need to keep the teamwork and collaboration intact. Those would be my three key takeaways.
Thank you, Anuradha. The last one to go here.
Yes, and I unmute myself. Okay, I think it's quite similar to what I think, and I've heard everyone. It's really same. I would take a leaf out of what Priya said in terms of shared values, and Madhavi touched upon shared agenda. I would say creating a shared economy should be the shared purpose we look at. So creating a shared economy, good for everyone, greater good, and which brings me back to my first point, which was about equity, equitability, and so being inclusive. So be it employees, be it a government, public private partnerships, wherever, I think the focus needs to be on inclusive growth in a shared economy. Of course, keeping sustainability as the base of it, because that what means is to keep a long term view. So you look for sustainable growth when you take a long term view. So taking a long term view, having inclusive growth agenda build a shared economy and leverage technology, which Flovia talked about, and that's very very important. So that gives a sense of pride to all of us, as a nation within a global economy. Building a sense of pride and inclusivity is the way to go forward.
Thank you so much, all of you, for your valuable inputs. And I've personally learned a lot during today's session. And as communicators, as all of you mentioned, there's a need for us to enable conversations with a measured approach on interconnectivity, interconnectedness, right resources, shared values, purpose, using technology as an enabler for greater good, acknowledging each other, organizations, institutions, not as competitors, but as peers, as ecosystem builders, or as social actors, and not losing the emotional, empathetic touch when we are trying to create inclusive growth together in a shared economy. So thank you so much for your time today. And personally, I'm taking back a lot of learnings from all of you. And with this, uh, we conclude today's session, and I hope the audience found the discussion fruitful and informative.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for this.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you, Sharmistha, and thank you to the panelists, Anuradha, Bishnupriya, Madhavi, Priya, and Flovie for this wonderfully crafted discussion today. With that, we have come to an end of IICC 2022. I now invite Julia Joseph, part of our extended team and an alumna of the School of Communication and Reputation, SCORE, to propose the vote of thanks. Julia?
Thank you, Anubhuti. On behalf of the entire organizing team, that includes Shreya, Sarika, Amita, I would like to thank all our panelists, moderators, and you, the attendees, for being part of the India Impact Communications Conclave, the Women's Day Special. I'm sure all of us are going away with a lot of key takeaways, learnings, and thought provoking ideas. I sure have gained a lot of insights today. This conclave was presented by Comms News and powered by Reputation Today with support from Spring Batch of Score. I thank all our supporting partners, Ideosphere Consulting, ICCPL, Kalolwala and Associates, Seraphim Consulting, Talking Point Communications, and the Pivotals. In a few weeks, we will curate the Influence Now Communications Conclave. Stay tuned for more on that. Next year, we'll be back with another edition of IICC. Until then, please follow us on Twitter at commsnews and RepTodayMac to stay updated on our upcoming online and offline events. Thank you, everyone, and have a great evening ahead.